Start the meeting.
Okay, so instead of roll call tonight and approval of the agenda, there's no audience business either. You guys can jump right to your business items. And hi, Brand.
Hello. I lost you guys. There you are. We don't have audio anymore. There it is.
Yeah. 1 second, Brendan. Thankfully, Maria is from the tech rates.
Okay.
Brandon, you want to start off with a statement, or you make a statement, or?
Sorry, Mayor Byrne, I can't hear you. Just kind of a mumble.
Oops, I can't hear you. That shows the-
Okay. Can you try again, Brandon?
Yeah, I can hear you right now. When Mayor Byrne was talking, it sounded very distant, and I couldn't really make out what he was saying.
Okay, we're trying to increase your volume on our end.
Okay.
Hang tight. And if I need to, I can turn it.
He's not gonna show up, I do.
They must not.
Okay, to the TV.
How about this? Try again, Brendan.
Testing.
Okay.
You want me to do a quick intro, Brandon, I'll turn it over to you for the legal technicalities? Does that work?
Do you want to? Sorry, you're still hard to hear. Do you want to give an intro?
Yeah, and then I'll turn it over to you for the legal
Okay.
discussion.
Yep. Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Yeah, this joint workshop, I guess it is now, kind of arose out of a couple of things. Number one, the Lions Municipal Code requires, twice a year joint meetings, it says, between the Board of Trustees and the PCDC, so we haven't done one yet this year, either prior or the new board. Okay, now you can call.
We needed you to have a quorum. Oh, God.
You're the forum. Now it's a meeting. So shift gears? Yeah, so now this qualifies as a joint meeting. We're gonna do the roll call there. Okay.
I'll start with the PCDC. I have Chair Evers,
Present.
Vice Chair Matthews, Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Feinkauser here, Commissioner Carabas,
Present.
and Commissioner Hunter. Now with the Board of Trustees, Mayor Brownie,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Wingard,
Present.
Trustee McCurry, Trustee Williams,
Present.
Trustee Lowell, Trustee Schwartz,
Present.
and Trustee Jacobs.
Present.
Okay.
Neil, it is your meeting.
Yeah, you
All right,
have,
let's approve the agenda, as chair and for approval of agendas. I will motion to approve the order of my second. Second. Okay, second. We did vote on this, still some, but if you don't mind clicking on the right button on the side, to the right, yes, to the left. You did a unanimous vote to approve the agenda, so we can move into item 4, general business now, and, you're around, you can pick it up where you left off.
and since it was appropriate to have a joint meeting anyway, there was a Colorado Supreme Court case pending since January that we discussed briefly a couple of times just in passing at the Board of Trustees that dealt with zoning and land unit development, issues, particularly with regard to the ability of citizens to do an initiative or a referendum, potentially reversing the city council or board of trustees decision on a PUD actually was what was involved in the case. And it seemed at the time that to have fairly broad significance in terms of the things we have done in the past in mind. We have both done PUDs in the past. Riverbend has had 2 different PUDs come through. There's a PUD that we approved only last year, I believe, for the Amarillo development avenue corridor, the other one on the paper plant. We've also in lines in the past done what are really customized zoning for particular uses that people were requesting at the time. Many years ago, Indian Lookout subdivision, the Indian Lookout Road subdivision, the Forsberg subdivision was actually done as an annexation and then a specialized zoning because the Forsbergs were trying to build Lions Crest Commander top of Indian Lookout Road, and they couldn't get the approvals they needed from the county. So they came to the town, so we like to do it down. And if you look in the zoning code, it has a A1 agricultural A1 zoning district and an agricultural A2 zoning district. And when you look at A2, it has basically special land for so we kind of customized the zoning data. And then 20+ years ago, Plant Bluegrass was put into a commercial entertainment district. It's sort of tailored for their uses and that sort of thing. You recently we've done a lot of PUDs, but this case addressed what could be a fairly significant issue in lines as to past or future customized zonings or PUDs, which is what right the citizens have to take a decision of the board of trustees, which under our code comes to the planning commission, we get to the board of trustees to a vote. And I just want to caution that we're not here tonight to talk about any specific current or future development that this case might affect. It's really just this kind of resets the landscape in a couple of ways on our kind of our general policies. And so we thought since we needed to have a joint meeting with these 2 bodies anyway, it'd be an appropriate subject of discussion of these are some things we need to look out for and look at what our existing code says and how this case will be changing. So with that preliminary, I'll turn it over to Attorney Dickman to discuss the legalities of the matter.
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor Browning. Is Planner Richie there by chance?
I'm here tonight, yes.
Did you want to talk about his PUDs generally first, or do you want me to? I have a
Sure.
few things I could say, but go ahead.
Yeah, so in the cover memo, I included language from our code that discusses the purpose of PUDs is really, sorry. The purposes of PUD, the fact that we have them existing and are both in the enabling legislation in our code and then in existence today. So I think I don't remember how many PUDs we have today in place, but our PUDs, I think kind of one of the original intents is, most towns in their code have like what we have, like our R1 zone, our A2 zone district, our commercial zone district. But I think a PUD is the ability of a town to look at a specific property and say, you know what, none of these make sense for this property. Let's come up with something that is very site specific, that's appropriate for this property. And it kind of is a negotiation and a give and take between the property owner and what the town wants. And it's not something that you create that is available townwide for any other property owner. It's really something that the community and the applicant come together and think about what is appropriate for this specific piece of land. And our code requires that, basically what are the benefits to the town? What are the unique circumstances that justify why a PUD might be appropriate? So there's some criteria when we think about why we would want to consider a PUD, what we need to have, what we can get in exchange for it. I'm happy to pull those up, but it's a very common tool in pretty much every community I've worked in. And as planners, this case happened in June. I don't think there's any consensus that I've heard amongst my peers that we're going to do anything different as a result of it. Not that we're not going to do things different as a result of it. I've heard that some communities, I think, are very fine with this outcome. Not everybody is concerned about this outcome. So I think it's a little too early to have a sense of what communities might be doing as a reaction to this case law, but agreed. So typically, land use approvals that require an ordinance here in Lyons, and I'll let Brandon talk about this, more specifically, are subject to a voter referendum. Typically, if it's approved by like a resolution, maybe like a development plan, then that couldn't be overturned. But I'm gonna let Brandon talk about, I think, the distinctions of what's eligible for referendum in our broader land use context, as well too. So Brandon, I'll let you kick it from there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. And the reason I asked for that is I do think understanding more generally what a PUD is and what kind of context it sits in is important to understanding this case and what, if any impacts this might have moving forward for how the town operates, for how other communities operate. Just knowing what a PUD is, and some of us are new, I think is extremely important. And so a couple of things I would add to the excellent, description that Lisa gave is that, zoning itself as a concept is relatively new in terms of the nation's history, right? So it only goes back to like really the early 1900s. And it was found out during that process that, it's really hard sometimes to anticipate what the future zoning needs are of a community. So, this tool was created of a PUD, which is sometimes referred to as contract zoning, which I think is important for understanding this case, as well, is that basically a contract is made between the developer and the municipality about what the special zoning looks like in exchange for things that are given up usually, for on the developer's side. So you may get more parking out of it, may get more open space, may get an affordable covenant, all sorts of things being negotiated to kind of create this special category. And that, in order to enable this in Colorado, since it, both zoning and then PUDs are a fairly new concept, there is a legislation that enabled this specifically. There's kind of some common law that enabled it beforehand, but the General Assembly got around to actually passing an enabling statute, that set forth criteria to do this, and it created a three-step process. One, which Lisa talked about, an enabling ordinance locally that sets forth the criteria, for how we evaluate, any sort of PUD that comes in. And so when a PUD comes in, we then evaluate it against those criteria as set forth in the PUD enabling ordinance. And then, through an amendment process, if we later need to amend a PUD because of changing circumstances. But what I will kind of state, which is again, I think is important understanding this case, is that, the ability to amend a PUD is not unlimited. There is a law in the state of Colorado that establishes, kind of the upper bounds on what you can do and can't do in amending a PUD, including that any amendment must be consistent with the purpose of the original PUD. It must not substantially harm the enjoyment of abutting property owners or of the public interest. And so with all that kind of background in mind, we can kind of get into this case and kind of understand it within that context. I do think the context is extremely important here, and that, I think if you don't understand that context, you may take things out of this case that may or may not actually be true. Okay, so talking about this case. So this case, it comes out of Telluride, and it's about a developer, who I'll call Brighton. They have a longer name than that, but Brighton's kind of the shortened version of that. And going back to the mid-90s, Brighton purchased this property. They were developing this property, which was 18 lots, over time from 1995 really to 2018. One particular lot, which is the subject of this case, was zoned as part of the original PUD plat for open space. And so from 1995 to 2018, track A was open space as part of this PUD. And again, that's pretty common. One of the things that we usually get out of a PUD is an open space dedication or a parks dedication. Pretty common requirement of a PUD agreement. And so over time, the PUD was amended according to the traditional process where it comes before the Board of Trustees or City Council, depending on what your jurisdiction is, for a resolution to amend the PUD. Brighton went through that process 7 different times. through 2018, they end up selling off every single lot except for Tract A, which is again the open space. On Tract A, they come forth with a proposal to say we're going to, take part of that and turn it into affordable housing is kind of their proposal. So in 2019, they put together kind of a formal, or 2018, excuse me, this formal amendment, a proposal to the town, saying, we want to amend the PUD once again to allow for this to happen because it was not currently permitted. It was, again, only allowable use was open space at that time. The town takes a look at it and says, we can't process this amendment. We can't even bring it forward because one of the criteria that was established in our enabling act for PUDs was that any amendment must be agreed to by all the landowners that are part of that PUD. And remember, Brighton at this point had sold off 17 of the lots, right? They only owned one lot, and the other 17 landowners couldn't agree on whether they wanted to do this or not. So rather than, kind of sit out and say, okay, thanks town, I guess we'll just sit with our open space, they kind of concoct what I call a novel idea of forming a coalition of landowners, citizens, and themselves to kickstart a petition for an initiative. And this initiative would say, we want to rezone, we want to amend the PUD of Lot A to allow for, it to be used for affordable housing, for multifamily housing. Again, pretty novel. Typically when we see initiatives, it's usually to stop something, or to change a decision that was made if it was a referendum. And so having a developer kind of do an initiative is somewhat novel in this case. The clerk, upon receiving this petition, rejects it. And the reason that she rejects it is it's administrative in nature, it's not legislative. And as Planner Ritchie was kind of talking about, the test in Colorado about whether something is subject to initiative is whether is it either administrative or legislative. And so what after Brighton sues, when the clerk rejects it, what the court is really analyzing here is whether this is a legislative act or whether it's an administrative act, because that really determines whether or not it is subject to initiative. And so that's, the background here, which I think is really important for understanding this case. And the court, then proceeds to examine, based on these facts, about whether or not this is subject to initiative. And so a little bit of the court history here, the district court says it's quasi-judicial and therefore not subject to initiative. The Court of Appeals says that no, actually it is legislative and therefore subject to initiative. And the Supreme Court gets a hold of it in Colorado and says, actually it's administrative, and therefore not subject to initiative. But how they get there, as they look through all these kind of the history of PUDs in Colorado that we talked about at the very start of this discussion about, again, the passage of the PUD Act, what the kind of the intended process was for amending a PUD, and then what, Brighton actually did, and where the court lands on this and says, you can't, kind of get around the prescribed process for amending a PUD in this way, because we believe that a PUD is an administrative act because it's essentially a contract. Again, remember contract zoning between the developer and the town. And the contract's administrative act. It's not a legislative act. It's not a broad set of policies affecting everyone in town. So because it's a contract and it's administrative, it can't be subject to initiative. And why this was, seen by some as being a big deal is because zoning, straight up zoning as opposed to PUDs, has always been seen as a legislative act. And then there's, Supreme Court history on that saying that, yes, is a legislative act and therefore would be subject to initiative. And this is different because it says, this particular type of zoning, PUD, once it's been set, is not subject to that same power of initiative. and potentially referendum, but the court doesn't exactly say that. And so that's where the court lands. And I think what we're really here to get at is, what are the implications of this? And I think, the implications are somewhat unknown at this point in time. And attached, to your packet was one analysis of this court case, which what I would say is fairly broad in its analysis of potential impacts. What is clear is that initiatives can't be done for PUD amendments. This analysis says that, that should extend to referendums, which is probably right, but again, not certain. The case doesn't say anything about referendums. And it also extends it out to other types of zoning, which I think is more speculative. And maybe not true, but again, we don't know because the court hasn't ruled on this particular issue. It's only ruled on one issue, which is whether or not a PUD amendment was subject to initiative processes. I think in particular that, the legal analysis that was provided, I think that maybe probably the scariest thing that it talks about is, saying that maybe zoning amendments are not be subject to initiative or other types of zoning actions. And I don't know if that's true or not. And I think the reason for that is that PUDs, again, have kind of upper bounds on what you can and cannot do as part of amendment process. That is not true for other types of zoning. And so it makes sense to some extent that, zoning amendments could be subject to initiative. And PUD amendments cannot, because there are no bounds on zoning and there are bounds on PUDs. However, we don't know because the court hasn't ruled on that issue yet. So we are all kind of waiting and speculating at this point to what extent this actually has an effect beyond the, the narrow context of PUD amendments. And so again, kind of what Lisa says, I think if you look at the broader, municipal attorney, bar, I think most people are kind of in a very much wait and see approach on this because, I think one reading of this case is it's pretty narrow to the situation of PUD amendment. I think we always have a saying as attorneys that bad facts make bad law. And I think in this case in particular, the fact that Brighton was really trying to circumnavigate the PUD amendment process, I think it led to, this decision in a lot of ways that it was a very clear intent to go around the town. And the court didn't want to go that way. And that's why you get a decision like this. But things to think about, certainly I think it was what Mayor Browning's getting at is that if we are to create a PUD, it could potentially be amended, or not amended. And there's really nothing that the citizens can do about that on the back end. If there's going to be an amendment, it still has to go before a public hearing as part of the state statute, as part of our code. And so they're going to have a chance for public input as part of that amendment process. But if the town, says that amendment can't happen because it doesn't meet its criteria, before even getting that public hearing process, there really isn't a remedy under this decision. So those are kind of the important things to think about. So I think it does create additional consideration when we're establishing a PUD, whether this makes sense, knowing that once we kind of set this, it kind of has to stay as it is. At least the general intent has to stay as it is for the life of that PUD versus kind of a customized zoning, which is much more readily changeable and also subject to these processes, on the back end if people are unhappy with the result. And so I think that's kind of my, broad look at this case, background, potential impacts. I'm happy to answer any questions about it to the extent I can. But, like all court cases, we're trying to, read the tea leaves to a certain extent. Because the decision only says so much. I mean, what the actual decision actually says is, in terms of the deciding part, is only three kind of lengthy paragraphs, and so there's not a ton there to take from. But happy to answer any questions to the extent that I can.
Can I ask a quick question, Brandon? I think just for the purpose of the group, it might be helpful to also clarify, like, which types of broad land use decisions in the town are eligible for referendum today, and which ones aren't. Like, for example, is the subdivision Could that get overturned by voters? Could a development plan, could a variance, just for context, like, where do you have that offhand? And that may be helpful.
Yeah, I don't have it offhand particular, but anything that's legislative obviously is fair game. For a referendum or initiative. We don't know the full limits of referendum, with regard to a PUD amendment. But obviously we now know that, at least for initiatives, it's off the table for, a citizen initiative. Straight up zoning, the initial decision, I think even maybe the initial decision on the PUD, if you under one reading in this decision are subject to a referendum and initiative. I would argue that a zoning amendment, at least until we're told otherwise, is still subject to initiative and referendum. There are other processes for reviewing and overturning potentially quasi-judicial processes. And so if you are offended, or not offended, but are affected in some way by the outcome of a variance proceeding, there's a process called a 106 appeal that you can go and appeal that. And so we can certainly change zoning, we can change the zoning text. Anything again that's legislative, pretty much anything that's in the code can be changed, via initiative or referendum.
Thank you.
Brandon, this is Mark. One thing that I found odd about this case is, as you say, the case itself specifically dealt with an amendment to a PUD, and that's what the actual whole case is. But toward the bottom of the opinion, the Colorado Supreme Court kind of went out of its way to say, okay, the initial enabling ordinance, which we have to allow PUDs generally, that's legislative because you're deciding what it's all about. But it also kind of addressed the middle ground, which is when you initially approve the PUD before it's even amended or not. They said that that's administrative and therefore presumably not subject to initiative. They didn't have to say that to decide the case. There was no original creation of a PUD in front of them. It had been created, like you said, 20 years ago. So I found it odd that they felt inappropriate to put that in an opinion. What's your reaction to that? And I think that's what's engendered a lot of the reaction from some of the other law firms and things. Wait a minute, they didn't just decide that an amendment to the PUD is administrative and therefore not subject to initiative. They also said the initial PUD itself is an administrative act, not a legislative act. That, to me, my question is that really a part of the holding? Is that applying in future cases or not? I don't think anybody knows. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know if it actually goes so far as to say that. It certainly says that, that the initial review of the PUD was based on case-specific considerations that require specialized knowledge, which would tend to, under their test they establish, suggest that it is administrative. But nowhere does it say that definitively that I'm reading the several paragraphs that are actually in Part C.
There's paragraph 33 in there that says it.
It says the enabling ordinance is legislative.
Right.
The amendment is administrative and not subject.
It says, pre-existing goals, it says, and marks the shift from acts that are legislative in character to those that are administrative in character. It's talking about the actual approval of a PUD application.
Yeah, it says once the sentence I think you're referring to is once enabling ordinance is passed, however, a PUD application is reviewed on site-specific basis to see if it conforms to standards under the enabling ordinance. This process enforces pre-existing legislative goals, namely those set forth in municipality relevant enabling ordinance. It marks a shift from acts that are legislative in character to those administrative in character. But I could see how you could. I mean, it seems to be that they're saying it's administrative, but I still don't think it's definitive because I think you read the next paragraph down, there's some indication that that they haven't decided that specifically. It doesn't say definitively that is a legislative act. Yeah, I don't know. I think you're probably right that there's definitely signaling that it's probably a legislative act, but I don't read this to say it's definitively that it is. Again, I think this is kind of the reason why this test was devised here is because of kind of the weird facts of this case. Because the developer was trying to get around the town. I think they were creating a construct based on those bad facts. And so I wouldn't say definitively that original PUD couldn't be subject to a referendum or initiative, but it certainly appears to be that way, based on some of this language.
And some question, Brandon, was this a topic at the CML conference, like in the whole legal strand? I'm
There
sure
wasn't-
already it will be.
Yeah, there wasn't like a specific session on it, and I because I'm speaking at the fall legal conference, there's not one specifically on this topic as well. I mean, it was certainly discussed as part of a couple different panels, but
Another place to watch, if this is a big topic, would be that Rocky Mountain Land Institute conference and.
I don't remember seeing on the ADA State of Colorado program for October. I don't know when sessions, office sessions.
Yeah. So no official guidance from CML. I don't really know if they do that.
yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier, I think there hasn't been a huge reaction. I think some people see this as a very positive thing, to kind of prevent what could be bad faith actors from trying to challenge PUDs on the back end. And so there's not really a consensus yet, I think, on what to do about this, if anything. I think it would be fair to say.
Thank you.
And one more thing I want to mention too, just to throw it out there as, yes, another option is, let's say that in the future, courts interpret this as some of this language says, and even the PUD application itself is determined to be administrative in character and not subject to citizen initiative or referendum. There is one more option that a local elected board would always have to take something to the citizens, I believe, and that's the referred ballot measure. And I passed around a copy of that statute. And I actually emailed CML about this and got a response from one of the CML attorneys that said, yeah, you can do that. We don't advise it. As a general practice and everything, that basically, even if the citizens themselves couldn't get 85 signatures or whatever it requires in lines now to put something on the ballot, the Board of Trustees, as I read this, would have the option to say, okay, this is a sufficient magnitude in this town that we're gonna take it to the voters. And so, do you agree that, and the CML attorneys seem to agree with that? Yeah, you always have that, exercise that option sparingly, but it's there if you want to use it. Do you agree with that?
100%, I would agree with that. I think that's,
Yeah.
I think it's consistent with the court's logic that, again, if it's coming from municipality, it's not trying to circumvent the PUD statute, right? The town's involved in that process. And so I think it would be logical, both based on the town's referred ballot measure powers and the logic of this holding, for that to be the case.
So one question, Brandon or Mark, whoever, what do you say to simplify? What are the practical implications of this, and what should we or should we not be doing? So that we're not making decisions that end up in the gray area going forward. Like what does this mean to us today? Anything?
Yeah,
Really,
I mean,
from a practical
I
standpoint?
think what it means today from a practical perspective is that there should be additional consideration given to when we set up a PUD, right? Knowing that initial enactment of that PUD basically sets the purpose of that PUD pretty significantly, in a way that can't be circumvented, from the outside, by trying to do an initiative to change it. It's only within the processes that the town controls could it be changed. And so I think it's additional consideration in how we design PUDs, knowing that they are more static, and more harder to change, than your traditional zoning.
Thank you.
Notwithstanding with that, is, the last time was the one out in Eastern Quarter for the ancient rate, I guess it's directly property. They asked for very broad authority and to pretty much do whatever they want to, including things that would be beyond the existing scope of the commercial Eastern Quarter district. And it was great. I think the PCDC recommended and the board approved it, I think unanimously. If that were proven before the board of trustees today, I'd have to think long and hard about approving that up front, knowing that any amendments down the road, citizens would have no say so. At the time that we approved that, I thought, well, if something comes along 5 years from now and they want to put a, I don't know, some objectionable use up there, the citizens can always put together an initiative and okay. But in this case, I don't think they can if you read it literally what they say. So in this kind of Lions in particular, as most of you know, there's a long history in Lions of citizens taking a very active role in town government. Some people have said too active and more back to the 5-acre rule and voting against Stone Canyon Phase 2 and doing the parks and open space ordinance and, with response to the housing and even doing the citizens initiative on single hauler trash of all things. I mean, so when you're talking about potentially eliminating citizens initiative and referendum rights and Lions, it's been an integral part of Lions town government for good or ill for many years. And so to me, it's kind of a big local democracy issue.
The one caveat I would give to that is that, citizens still have the power and the say and as to amendments, during the amendment process itself. There still has to be a public hearing. But once that process is done, then, the power is lost to make changes.
To me, I would add, I think it makes the community engagement in the public hearing process even more important. Not that they're all not important. But, it's a reflection.
Is that a question or is that a reflect? I didn't know if it was an option or a reflection.
No, it's not a reflection. Remember, there's 2 hearings at PCDC and then another 2 hearings at the UFT at minimum, right? So
2 meetings.
At PCDC.
but lots of opportunities for people to
And often
show
work.
up. More than one opportunity to show up in person, lots of opportunity to write in and share and so forth. So sure, Karamas, you're ready to talk.
Yes, I have a question, Brandon.
Yep.
Hopefully this will be clear, but do you think it has something to do with the application of the PUD once it's in place and how it is being applied to a particular developer as opposed to reviewing the PUD as a whole and making a change to that or someone else that wants to come in? This to me seemed like the reason it was administrative is that the governing body was just applying what was already in place. I don't know if that makes sense or if you can speak to that.
Yeah, I think at least in part of its analysis in determining whether it was a legislative or administrative, the court, specifically pointed out that it was applying the facts to the previous legislative enactment. And so I think that did, help with the court's analysis as to whether this was legislative or, administrative. But I don't know if, that necessarily that doesn't change, I think, the result if someone were to come into something different necessarily. I think that any amendment is going to be not subject to initiative. I think the holding is pretty broad here, and it could be the initial, but again, it's not set. It's not 100% clear. But I think it was important to the court's analysis of that. That's what was being done as part of that amendment. I think if you wanted to repeal the PUD or changes, rezone it, which is how you get rid of a PUD, I think there could be a different result here.
The question that I had is there any recommendation for any change in the language for our PUDs?
Not a consensus, that municipal attorneys haven't said we should all do this. Again, I think some people are celebrating this, decision. And so there's not a whole lot of people that are, saying we must do this to preserve the power initiative at this time. I'm certainly, there are people that feel that way, but no consensus on changes that need to be made.
I think to that point, though, I think that's part of the reason why the mayor wanted to have this discussion with both groups, just to kind of raise this FYI, this happened. Do we, as PCDC and the board, or do you?
Yeah.
Are you concerned? Does this concern you? You want to talk about it further? You're not concerned? So I think that is kind of one of the things that staff is curious to hear from you.
The same discussion, I mean, my personal view on this as a commissioner is that it's too complex for what I generally see with PCDC being able to like provide staff input and direction. So I think we would lean on staff as a commission, but that's Neil's speaking, not full commission speaking. Are there any other discussion items on this one?
No. Not on this particular topic, no.
And if the Bernie desire to make announcements or other, opinions, let's do it. Otherwise, maybe we move on to four, two.
I see Brandon.
The only thing I would kind of say in response to that, Chair Evers, is that, staff is definitely willing to help with figuring out what, the response should be once the policy is set. But until the policy is set, where, we want to do whatever we can to preserve citizen initiative, or, we're going to wait and see. There's really nothing staff can do until that policy is set.
Yeah, that makes sense. As far as land use is considered, though, and accommodating things around decisions on land use, I think the PCDC's input is usually pretty straightforward on deciding zoning or types of zoning or discussions around it. But nuance of legal precedents, a lot of scope for us. So I hope you're not counting on us to come up with something novel here to think about.
Want to,
Yeah. You want me to
be
do
aware, in case you didn't have it.
Yeah, for sure. Did you want me to acknowledge something?
I wanted to acknowledge the question, right, at 6:42.
Okay, 6:42 PM, we have one more commissioner joining the commission.
Anything else from the board on this topic?
Great. With that, let's move on to item 4.2, discussion of the USP 24-174 requirements, political compliance, strategic growth element of comprehensive plan. Is there a staff presentation on this?
Yeah, so, PCDC has talked about this a couple times. I just thought I would take the opportunity to bring the board up to speed, since we have a few minutes, on kind of where PCDC is heading on this. I also had the pleasure of talking about this tonight. This is an update, doing kind of a first intro to this topic with our Housing and Human Services Commission. So we still have to go to all the boards and commissions, but as you know, I'm going to find the map and pull that up. So as you all know, we are subject to Colorado SB 24-174, which is a housing bill that's multi-layered that requires quite a few things of Lions, as we talked about. The first step was adoption of a housing needs assessment. We took care of that last fall. The next step, which is the step we're currently in tonight, which is adoption of a strategic growth overlay, as well as alignment with our water supply, which we're going to talk about in just the PCDC portion of the meeting with Aaron, Director Kaplan. But PCDC has had the chance, so kind of looking at the board now, on the strategic growth overlay, I'm going to share my screen, to refine the direction that the map is heading. And so I just want to share this with you. I have a couple different data sets on this map that may or may not be helpful. I'm going to start by turning them off. Oh, turning them off. We're going to turn our zoning map off. So the black outline is property that's already within incorporated town of Lyons. The red outline is the draft strategic growth overlay. And just to make sure we're all on the same page, the strategic growth overlay is the area of town where we would like to highlight opportunities for infill and redevelopment, both for our own economic goals, but also to meet our housing needs assessment, which then in 2027, our next step in this whole process is our housing action plan. And so we're required to look at vacant and underutilized properties, that are near transit and jobs. We checked with Ola, we still have to do this. And so they suggested kind of this corridor approach, which we think makes sense. We've also been looking at this from a strategy of kind of refining and fine tuning all the policy work that we've already been doing over the last number of years. So not kind of revisiting and opening up this can entirely, but really looking at all the work that's happened over the last 5 or 10 years and really refining and prioritizing that. So PCDC met last, is it just a week ago we did this?
Yeah,
It was just a week ago. 2 weeks ago? It was 2 weeks ago. Thank you. That's right. 2 weeks ago. And we looked at the map. And I'm gonna turn our zoning map on, zoning layer, and then I can also turn on the aerial imagery underneath just to kind of see. So again, the red outline, I think, is the direction the map is going so far. It starts kind of at the unannexed enclave out on the Planet Bluegrass side, short of the residential neighborhood of Eagle Canyon and the open space, comes down along through the Main Street corridor. I want to reiterate as we get here, this doesn't require a property owner to change anything. This doesn't mean the town is going to rezone any property. This just means that there's consensus, you know, that kind of these properties have capacity for infill and potential redevelopment, maybe in the future, maybe not today, right? So looking for just want to make sure that that's clear as we look at properties that are existing, have existing uses and development today. We're not saying we have to change, we're saying they could change. We have the Riverbend property and the automotive property kind of outlined here. Again, leaving the residential ag property and town parks off the map. Coming into our historic downtown, we have brought it down kind of up as far north as the properties on the north side of High Street, the commercial properties, down as far south as the town hall site and the property immediately to the east next door, kind of bringing it back up to just the commercially developed property, avoiding Sandstone Park, Walt South, the post office. Again, bringing it down along the corridor, and I think probably our strongest opportunity for what we would look at as traditionally kind of underdeveloped sites might be along here. You can see some larger parking lots. Bringing it along our corridor. It really narrows here because we're constrained by the floodplain. The river is very close to the highway, and we've got some pretty good topography on the north side. Bringing it down here to this kind of node of commercial development we have on the north side of the highway near Stone Canyon. We have some opportunities with some unannexed properties here. Again, bringing it down the highway. And finally, I think our biggest opportunity areas potentially are here. I'm going to turn on one layer, an additional layer that we have on this map, which is our Boulder County open space layer. And this really shows the constraints. I don't know why that's not activated. There we go. I've also turned on the floodplain. Turn this off and back on, maybe it'll pop on. That's a service from the county, so we're gonna blame the county. Sure or not, but anyway, if that layer were activated, you would see that most of this property on the outside of this red line is either owned by Boulder County or constrained with an easement. Not necessarily over here on the west side of the highway, but really we've tried to align kind of the conversations with the IGA that happened over the last couple of years with kind of the impacted development footprint over on the Lucanen property, and then again, kind of coming out to the east side of Highland Drive. So this map isn't binding. Again, it doesn't require that development happen here. If we get a really interesting proposal outside this line, the town can certainly entertain it. But this is the scope of the map. If we think about other opportunities that would be outside this map, what we've talked about with PCDC is rather than maybe showing, which, I think some might say there's some additional capacity in our residential neighborhoods, our comprehensive plan also talks about, the town should look at the opportunity for duplexes and triplexes in our residential neighborhood. We're not proposing to draw the line around our residential neighborhoods at this time, rather kind of an asterisk in this addendum that would just highlight that those policies exist in our plan today. So I'm just going to kind of pause there. Again, PCDC's talked about this quite a bit. We're kind of at the point where we're going to take this out to both our boards and commissions, and then the bring it back to the board for further direction. But since we had a few minutes onto this agenda, I don't know, trustee Schwartz, if there's anything else you want to add, or Neil, Chair Evers, anything else you want to add? So we can receive direction, or this can just be an update, whatever is best. Go ahead.
I'll wait for electeds. Anybody? I know we've already talked about this map too, but as I look at it a second time.
Yep.
Can you close up on the commercial downtown?
Yep.
That there was robust conversation about whether to include the post office and Sands.
Oh, you already
Because
have
if you
that.
go down,
We
then
have
you
the
include the
PCDC.
park, so
Oh.
if anybody wants to remind them.
Oh, that's what I was gonna say. I would actually think that you would include almost anything other than just straight R2 in this area. Only because the town does own the parking lot or the post office lot.
Yep.
And at some point, Walt Self will need a rehab.
Yep.
And if there's potential to go 2 stories there or potential to do something different, I would hate to not have that as a potential growth area for infill and redevelopment. But if you guys have had it and this is your recommendation, then we'll wait till it comes to the board of trustees.
I think PCDC had that conversation, and there were lots of mixed opinions. I think I might summarize this. I think to some degree, they didn't want to cause undue kind of stress on the community by potentially putting areas on the map that maybe weren't right for redevelopment, but I do think they agreed that there was infill and redevelopment potential on those properties. So I see.
That's a great way of saying it. I think a lot of the conversation around what is the intent of this, we were required to do it, but in so much as it's an exercise, what do we also want to gain from it? And I think our general conversational consensus was that let's not make it super political. We don't have to.
Well, anywhere the red line is round will be political.
Correct.
Yeah, so for me, being the owner or involved with the ownership of 2 of the 3 of those. I would highly support that those be considered for infill and redevelopment if and when that time comes.
I think when I take this to the boards and commissions, we can certainly, I can bring that up to get
Sure. Well, I'm
opinions.
sure the other groups will.
Yeah.
If they will. I just, when I looked at it, it was like, why are those?
Yeah, that was a good topic
Yeah.
of discussion.
Okay.
I just I could see that for Walt South and for the post office
Yeah.
property as well. Sandstone Park is a particular lightning rod, and for those of you who weren't here, I was just really organized back then. It was actually a very contentious vote in 2007, I believe it was, on a proposal that included development in Sandstone Park, and it went down by landslide. And so if you had that line drawn around Sandstone Park, but not the other 2 parks, I think you would eventually provoke some
Yeah,
reaction.
sure, if you want to put a.
Yeah, I mean, you can draw the line.
We thought about kind of doing like this little finger here,
Yeah.
avoid the park, but bring the thing, but then again, you have like 2 residential uses here, right? So we thought about like, you could bring the finger kind of like that. So I think that's still, I think it's still potentially something that the town could add.
Well, we redo our comprehensive plan every 10 years, because the town changes, its habits change, and things sway and swing, right? So something that was voted on almost 20 years ago may not be a reason not to do it today, but put it to the commissions,
Yeah.
the other ones, and ask them, and that's a better representative sample of our food.
Yeah, so just a general comment on this whole process. I think one of the things that we as a collective group need to do is make sure this doesn't take on a life of its own and become some communication to the community that we plan to redevelop everything in the line. That this is a map of areas that we'll try to focus over the next years or whatever, and it's to solve
Mhm.
a state requirement, and this is not another IGA that people are gonna look at and go, why are we annexing all these properties? Or, you know, I just think what the town does not need another IGA, and we've gotta be critically careful about how this map is even being discussed and presented, talked about, so it doesn't take on life of its own. But if I was drawing the lines, I would include all the Walt Self and that whole thing. If we need to, let's draw another line or lash just through the park, just to be clear, but I just hope everybody's on the same page of what the intent of this project is.
I think it's fair to bring up, you know, I do think like PCDC, you all weren't concerned about putting them on the map. I think you were more concerned about the concern it might raise to put on the map. And so to your point, Chair Evers, I think, you know, after we talk with all the boards and commissions, and if nobody's concerned about putting them on the map, then I think we feel like it probably won't turn into more of it. Well, I will certainly ask that targeted question, I think, and just get back on it. Because I think you all were concerned about.
Our goal should not be to avoid conversations around land use and zoning. Our goal should be to open up conversations. And if some people get upset, that's not great. We don't want them to be upset, but we do want people engaged and interested in land use. So I didn't participate in the IGA task force, and I bet it was very painful. But I think it's one of the best things that's happened to land use in mine. It's my short time here, at least. There's so many people interested.
Good feedback. Any questions from the board on kind of where we're going or how this is moving along?
Well, my comment is that Neil's spot on, because three of us in the room, we're on the IGA task force. And so we have to be careful in how we communicate. Do that.
But we don't avoid open communication,
No,
we just
right.
are clear on what we were doing and what we are not.
All right. Well, I think we're good on this. If there's any more.
Next steps are to take each board and commission and
Yep.
then it goes back to planning.
No, then it comes back to the board. So PCDC has weighed in on, I think, you know, we've talked about the map a couple of times. I think if I recall based on the consensus that you all, the direction that you all had given us, we get some more feedback and then we revisit, update the board and then come back for action.
Should they say like October for the board or longer?
Probably October, November. Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna need one. I know we have to get it done by the end of December, but I'm not sure how long the boards and commissions are gonna wanna take. Like I know HHSC, they were kind of my guinea pig. We did that tonight with them. So they're on the early side, but I think they kind of wanted to think about it and come back next time. Not every board might feel that way, but I think Housing and Human Services, given the point of this is housing. They just kind of wanted to make sure they had time to ponder.
One quick question, supposed to Brandon, I guess mostly. After 24-174 was passed, there were a number of municipalities, larger municipalities, I think, that challenged. There are also executive orders that Governor Polis did implementing 24-174 that the municipalities already went beyond the scope of the statute. Any idea where that litigation stands now?
They're still going, is what I understand from the last CML conference, is that they're kind of stuck in that procedural phase of things, and there's no decision on it. But I know Aurora and Broomfield are definitely involved in it, so I'm sure once there is a decision, we'll know, because it'll be a big deal.
And I guess we're all waiting to see that whoever the next governor is, whether those orders will be modified or not.
Yeah, I think there's a thought, and then maybe the reason why the court's kind of holding their, taking their sweet time on this is that the next governor is not gonna do that. And so I think there's maybe some intentional stalling on this. It just goes away once the next governor comes in power.
Thanks.
Anything you all else would like to share with the board during your joint meeting?
My time on PCDC, I guess it's almost 6 years. We've had many different planners, many different people roll through, so you're board trustees now. The conversation around what residential zoning is in Lyons has been constant. And I don't know how many cracks you get at it from a large public collecting of information. Kind of way we've been workshops that we're doing, but getting people involved in talking about zoning and what residential zoning is in Lyons is, I think, personally important. And again, I'm not speaking for the commission, but it's been a constant since then. So this is an opportunity to do that. It doesn't mean you need to hurt people's feelings, get people riled up and make them think their property is going to change under their feet. That's not true. That's what we think. But there aren't many opportunities to make town consider what its residential zoning goals are. So it does seem like an opportunity, but I have to see. For what it's worth, I think, depending on what the other commissions get back to you, and what I can get, any chance we can open conversation in our town about our own subject. So that's my soapbox.
Thank you.
Any other last lingering comments or discussion points or anything that anyone would like to do? Otherwise, we can close the general business. Okay, we'll close general business and move into our public workshop in a moment. I think the board of trustees is gonna leave for the public workshop or is invited to stay if you want to stay.
So we adjourn this meeting.
We're gonna adjourn it?
Yeah.
Okay, is that a motion to adjourn it?
I'll on the podium. And I'll bring out the hand right.
Capital trustees, as your liaison, thank you for your service.
Yes.
Thank you for so much thoughtful discussion on this. And they wanted to learn more about water, which I said, me too, and I've been in a couple of workshops already, so, so we can advise on the water element of the strategic plan as well, so.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And
Thanks for rejoicing us.
Yeah. I think we close the meeting, all motions, movement.
Oh, yeah.
Second. Okay, cool. I think we vote, so if you don't mind putting it in the right, so yes. Do it. Yeah, this is right here.
Victoria, Victoria, do you want me here for the PCDC workshop or?
He's doing some water 101.
We're just doing water 101 on the water supply element. I think you're good,
I
Brandon.
think we're
Okay.
good too.
As much as I
Thank
love talking
you.
water, I'll take off. So,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
all right, thanks a lot. Bye.
Aaron, we should move on where you
We're having a meeting right now.
And,
Yeah.
And the last time we were here, everyone said that awesome, there's a meeting, but it's unlikely, that's why the board called it up for me to have a meeting. And so I didn't hear anything. And I got a big email from that, and I
You guys
said,
are talking now.
I haven't been given my tally. So I followed up, I saw that, at the end of July, and still hadn't received.
I don't
She
have
said
that.
she had submitted it to IT. But that was, the last, I reached out to her twice on that.
So
I don't remember the tag one is this either.
Cause I sent it to Jay Hunter, it sounded like, oh my God.
Okay.
So that would probably be why. We'll get to this. Doesn't have any money. So let's just make sure that we get you guys are, yeah.
think so.
Okay.
Yes, I had no idea.
Sorry about that. That was all that you get really my meeting.
Okay, yeah, so it's in your Jay Hunter at townofland.com.
Yeah, we
I
haven't. We
I never know.
Email, I should say.
Okay.
You ready for when I take a week
You
off?
can subscribe to the packet and,
Oh, okay.
publish it. And part of that's because people come and go so much that it's like hard.
I did.
Sorry about that, that's unfortunate, but
I know,
I know I just felt bad for John, because I was like, we had to announce that John was late.
I know.
But yeah, it's like that.
it is good for the record, but you're right,
All good.
I just, well, anytime new members come in, I just always assume their emails, like, they just,
I was
they,
gonna say, I have town email now,
Yeah.
but like my Zoom notice was sent to another email.
got it.
Doesn't matter, I mean, I got.
No, it does, though, we'll get everything. There is always a bumpy transition when we never know if your town emails are set
Right.
up and all of that, so, okay, we'll,
And there is a chair email, and I've been chair before, and I've never, I think Mark emails me there sometimes, but no one else uses it.
I don't ever use chair.
If you're doing email follow-up, would you check on that one?
Yeah.
Maybe Get rid of it, that'd be fine too.
No, I think you should keep it as
Okay.
the chairs in general should all, because there can be a group set to go out to all the chairs. That's the only thing I use for my UEB. As it rotates through, then you don't have to worry, it's always to the chair at UEB for me. And then it doesn't matter if they transition and change people, I know I'm getting the chair.
Yeah.
It may matter if they get it set up, but.
Make sure the right person. Well, we have to take
Fair
this
point.
problem, right? Is like, that's
Come back
all
to me
of
as
the
another head of
breakdown.
my
Like, This
IT
group has changed so much
coordinator
over
for
the
the
last few
town.
months. I think that's partly why, like, we've had such turnover on this. group.
Traumatic
It's been, I
thumbprint on
think,
your IT coordinator.
Too many people.
Well, Maria, correct, we got out of here as fast as possible, but I'll follow us first.
All right, so workshop time, at your request, Aaron had availability tonight, so he is here he put some items in the packet for you, so I'm gonna let Aaron take this one.
Okay, cool.
And I think,
Thanks, Aaron.
hello, everybody, new commissioners, haven't seen me. I've sat in Lisa's role for a little bit while I'm filling in here and there, so I've been on some of the PCDC meetings and assisted again, as yes, we've transitioned through, I think it's 5 or 6 planning staff, as I've been the UEB director, utility director, sorry. So I wanted to start mostly with 2 things. One, a little bit of background about our water and our water supply. And then 2, about what it is that's being talked about, why there's the water supply elements added to the comprehensive plan. Right, those would be the 2 background items. We're really discussing this because it became law that the state wanted anyone who's doing a comprehensive plan start to include how they're gonna get water to build, right? How they're gonna grow and have enough water when there are a lot of concerns out there with the water supply. Before you can get into that, you have to have some understanding of your own water supply. So I think the basics are that the town of Lyons gets treated water from Longmont. In exchange for that treated water, we do have to supply them with raw water rights. So in Colorado, any water that you want to use, you have to have a right to it documented somewhere. You could have a direct access or water rights directly through, let's say, the St. Vrain Creek, which we do. The town has a relatively, yes, you'd say it's junior. It's from 1870 or 1880. I can't remember that we have.
Yeah.
So that gets us water directly out of the St. Vrain Creek. We basically then say, Longmont, here's our rights to this water. Can you treat it for us and send it back to us as potable water for us to use? That water right, again, mentioning 1870, 1880 is actually junior. If you didn't have water rights by 1870, you can run out of water when it gets dry or have problems. So that was one of the big reasons Northern Water developed the Colorado Big Thompson, because there were a number of locations along the Front Range, mostly agriculture at the time. But then it became more municipal, that there needed to be some way to supplement water on the east, where there was much more growth, with water on the west, where there was much more water. So there's actually a large supply of water along the Front Range that actually comes from the Colorado River through the Continental Divide over to Lake Mary up in Estes, and then comes down. And Northern Water Conservation District runs that whole process. It is actually a federal program, and Northern Water is just the operator, administrator of that. So again, it can get a little convoluted, and water rights can quickly get that way, but we actually, nobody owns Northern Water except the federal government. You have the right to use your water that you own or that you lease, however we want to declare it. You know, most of the time we talk about Colorado Big Thompson or CBT water rights. That's one of the larger water rights that are talked about along the Front Range. because they are usable in a number of locations. Again, if you have water just on the St. Vrain Creek, you'd have to be able to get that water to wherever you're treating the water. The Colorado Big Thompson through the Northern Water Conservancy District has a large footprint where they can spread that water out and get it to a lot of different water treatment plants. So from year to year, our St. Vrain Creek water sometimes can be 25%, 50%, 0. It doesn't get much above 75% going back the last 7 or 8 years of the water we need. Our Colorado Big Thompson water supply could cover all of our needs currently, even without our current St. Vrain Creek or native water. But the Colorado Big Thompson was developed to be supplemental. So it always has to supplement something. You can't go in and just develop a city or do some development based on your Colorado Big Thompson. You have to have some native water rights that you are working with, and then Northern Water can supplement that with the Colorado Big Thompson. So those are the two bigger water rights that we supply to Longmont. More recently, a newer water right was Lake McIntosh, which is out east of us as you get to Longmont. Most of that is irrigation based, but it is a water right that Longmont can use. So when Longmont and Lyons were really discussing what other options were there for water rights, for those who don't know, Colorado Big Thompson water started to get really expensive, especially in the last 20 years, just quadrupling, quintupling. I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it's at least 5, maybe 10 times more than it was in 2000 as growth started. So right now, one CBT, Colorado Big Thompson, or 1 unit of this CBT is probably $60,000. Currently, the town, will get into this a little bit more, requires 1 unit of CBT for 1 single family home or 3/4 inch connection. So you can see that being a pretty expensive off the bat to have any kind of growth. That's a big chunk of change. So how could we try to get more affordable housing, since that has been the big concern for probably a decade, the last 5 years? And this Lake McIntosh water it's about 15,000 per share. We do require a share and a half. So let's say you're at 20, between 20 and 25,000, but compare that to 60,000. Again, you're probably about 1/3 of the price. So it was a way through discussions with Longmont that the town could look at some type of water right that would also help for affordable housing. So those are really the 3 water rights we work with right now.
Sorry, quick question.
Yeah.
A unit is not an acre foot, I'm seeing.
We can get into it. A unit of Colorado Big Thompson, in general, you could look at it as an acre foot, but Northern Water actually each year decrees how much water your unit is going to get.
Okay.
So some years, this year, it was at 80% of an acre foot, so 0.8 of an acre foot. The average is 0.7. So a lot of people do look at 1 unit of CBT as 70% or 7/10 of an acre foot of water.
And a unit would be like a yearly allotment of water?
Yes. Because the units are what we have, how many units we have, but every year Northern Water says this is how much water you get for your unit. So we owning 500 units, we could get 350 acre foot if it's the average of 0.7.
And we don't get to decide, maybe I'm still in your thunder, so you'll be quiet,
Right.
but we don't get to decide how much water is used. Like, we don't get to.
I get to vote, or we get to vote, and I go, I don't know how much impact that vote really has in the big scheme of Northern Water, but they do allow everyone to do a vote. There is some discussion at their meetings on it. It is interesting, we can digress pretty quickly, but just recently, the drought was going on even when this meeting occurred, and the average is 7/10. Why would they put out 8/10 and give you more water in a drought? And that's again, because of the origination of this being agriculture, agriculture really needed the water. And that's what this was developed for, was to try to supply water in times of drought to agriculture. So now with municipal in there is some skewing to it, and I know there's been some discussion on how that works, but that's the system we currently have.
Okay, and I think you answered it, but just to make sure, the question really is more like, do we get to decide a single family's amount, or is it even by some kind of?
Sorry.
Yeah, okay, but actually, a good segue.
Yeah, no, that's where I was.
It's for agricultural purposes by intent historically, like obviously residential difference, probably not covering your land in a foot of water every year.
We can decide what we want for development. We could say if we wanted, 2 units of CBT, or if we wanted 2 acre feet of water for any development. We recently just revised the municipal code to remove the requirement for water right dedication from annexations, where it really comes in from outside, to the actual service connection. So we hadn't got into that part yet, but most communities, most municipalities, jurisdictions look at water based on what's gonna annex in, where their growth is gonna be. Lyons, because of our intergovernmental agreement with Longmont that we started in 2004, when we stopped treating our own water and had Longmont start treating water for us. That agreement was developed and it said, okay, we are gonna require 1 unit of CBT for each 3/4 inch equivalent connection. And a single family home usually requires a 3/4 inch equivalent connection.
Okay.
It really doesn't need that much water. A lot of places would say we could get by with 3. You could probably get by, especially with, let's just do it 4 to be quarters then. If you had 4 single family homes could get by with 1 unit of CBT. Therefore, we are sitting pretty good because we've always been requiring 1 unit of CBT for this connection. And we really, each connection doesn't use that much water. But it was a requirement. Longmont said, okay, if you want us to treat our water, we want to make sure that you are monitoring your water rights. You are making sure you have enough water, because at least this is what I was told from some of the people there. They felt, well, we're not gonna not give you water if you run out, because you're right here, you're a municipality. So we don't wanna be put in that position to give you water when you don't have enough water rights, and we really wanna make sure you have enough water rights. Maybe it was a simple way to go. So
That's
we
great.
then get into now, that leads into where this IGA, this agreement with Longmont, which has been the real basis for how we are requiring water as there is new development. Again, it's still been in the annexation portion of the code, I think because nobody changed it from 2004. Before that, it talked about you could bring in native water rights and other types of water rights, and you would use this much water if you were gonna zone it residential, or this much water if you were gonna zone it commercial. That led to a few flip-flops in our code, because we were looking at existing locations that were not developed, that would not actually have a water right requirement. They're in town. There are the 8 parcels. Let's just say now we're getting down, we have 7, 1 house has gone up, and potentially down to 6 on McConnell and Carter, the empty lots there. And what would require them to have a water dedication requirement? Sometimes there was a subdivision, SIA, subdivision improvement agreement, and that could dictate potentially there's water. There are a couple parcels in town. There's 2 small parcels up on Outlook off of First Avenue that were basically in town in 2004, that there's no development on there. What would require them to provide water rights to the town? There wasn't anything really set in the code. So at one point, the utility board and discussions with staff were, okay, we have to change the code. We're running out of CBT. We need to actually make sure even these parcels supply water. And then some additional research turned things around and said, oh, actually, there were all these shares of CBT that existed when the town joined with Longmont in 2004. And those water rights are in place to cover some of the developable lots in town. We're actually down to, I think it's 4 lots in town that currently are not connected to the water system that do not have to bring in water rights. Everything else in town, based on a subdivision agreement or some other reasoning, you subdivide, you have to bring in water. The agreement over for those lots on McConnell and Carter says you have to bring in water. So there were these few lots left, otherwise, everything else needs to bring in its own water rights. We get to that because again, how are you gonna make sure you have enough water as you develop? Well, we really already have that in place based on our code. And our code then is based on the agreement with Longmont that says you must bring in the water rights to connect to the water system.
And 1 share per unit is the IGA with Longmont, right?
So it's based on a 3/4 inch equivalent. So if your development needs a 3/4 inch equivalent, we say you need 1 unit of CBT. Or it's 1.4, but to simplify, let's say 1.5 units of Lake McIntosh reservoir water. Those are really the 2 options to bring in water that are both supposed to be about 7/10 of an acre foot of water. And so I was gonna go with that just to emphasize that, so if a bigger development comes in and needs a 1 inch water line, that's really 2 of these 3/4 inch equivalents, so you need double that. If you're gonna bring in and say you need a 2 inch water line, it's really a geometric progression. You need, 1.5 is 4 units, 2 inch is 8 units of this, so that's how we make sure if you need a bigger water connection, you actually need to bring in more water rights. So our code, again, is really set up to watch out for each connection and make sure it brings in enough water rights. So then I guess anything so far, again, there's a lot more there. I didn't know how much we wanted to go into it, trying to give some of the basics and not get too in-depth.
It's fascinating.
On our water supply and how we're making sure we get water rights as we have more demand, being a water connection.
Well, I think, a lot of our conversations around growth have been based on residential growth, right? Single family homes or R1 zoning to something more dense. And so the question always comes like, can we support it with our water? Which is obviously very complicated to answer, but if you think about those units, presumably being 3/4 inch connections, so 1 unit or 1.4 if it's McIntosh. But we don't really, based on my experience in past year, we don't really talk about McIntosh unless there's kind of like
Only certain people.
a political agreement with the town, like the affordable housing development, that was to lower some costs there. But typically like the private person who comes into town buys a developable lot, if there's any available, and develops it, they're looking at CBT, right? So looking at 1 unit of CBT.
Yeah.
And if somebody were, like, let's say we, in some future version of Lions had R2 zoning for portions of what are now R1, that would need to be considered whether or not a unit of CBT could support 2 units on the lot instead of 1 unit on the lot, right?
Well, they're gonna look at, their engineer's gonna tell them whether they come in, can their units support the water for that 3/4 inch connection?
Right.
If it has an existing 3/4 and they need to go up to 1 inch, they're gonna need to supply additional water rights for that. So it's somewhat already looked at and covered. The engineer is gonna have this, because if they can't build another, if we're talking about increasing what's existing, without looking at it from an engineering perspective and how much water is needed.
Yeah, I do the plumbing fixture count forms for Boulder all the time, and it's like, we count sinks and toilets. And all those.
There's mixed opinions, like that presumes every faucet is all open all at the same time.
Well, yeah.
I have a lot of opinions on fixture count forms being the effective tool, but yeah.
How do we do it?
Again, the engineer is gonna come tell us if they really think they can get by with the 3/4 inch tab. They could install that. They may run into problems in the future and say, oh, our 3/4 inch water line's not working for this development.
But to your point, we don't require a fixture count form like with a single family house.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, I'm both guarding this
Oh, no, you're-
for my own interest, but what engineer? Because we don't, single family development don't require.
Yeah, we don't require a fixture count form.
No,
You mean
again,
lots?
when the developer is looking at their development.
Yeah.
And is gonna say whether or not they need, I mean, right, a single family home is not gonna go over the 3/4 inch. We put that as 260,000 gallons a year of water. That's also written into the code. It could be looked at as reducing that, but that's what we, so
It'd be up to staff to like flag it then if there was a development proposal.
if something goes over it, we will tell you you have to upgrade.
Yeah.
So we'll, which I think is what's flexible, will allow someone to do the building and say, yeah, we're gonna get by with this, and then if it doesn't. Okay, you're using more than 260,000 gallons, you need to at least pay and put in the water rights for what would be a 1 inch, that's the next size up.
For like a commercial development, that's where the process would happen. With single family home, it's just.
I've never seen anyone go over that volume.
I have over
260?
using a, I don't know, 260, but using a plumbing fixture count form in Boulder.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, I've done, I don't know, maybe like 35 developments or something. I
Yep.
think 4 of them have gone over, 5 of them.
But I think one thing, as you mentioned, we don't talk about Lake McIntosh a lot, but that is one of the items into the water element of the strategic growth. It's something we've already done, because I think getting into that, so the second part is, why is this being looked at? So as you develop, it's not just about cutting people off from water, right? We're not just saying, at least from my understanding, is you're not supposed to use development or things like investment fees or these tap fees to use it as a restrictor to say you can't develop because we're gonna make it so exorbitantly high. They want us to be looking at what is a good balance between requiring water rights and allowing growth. We want this affordable growth, right? It's what's really being pushed out there, that we're supposed to be doing affordable housing and some type of growth for that. But if it has to have a CBT, then it's not affordable. So it had already been looked at a few years back, what could be done. And so this Lake McIntosh was something the town did. And as you mentioned, it was originally only for affordable housing and commercial. It is economic development, which is a fuzzy area, but commercial is something the town really wanted, affordable housing the town really wanted. So you could use Lake McIntosh. But again, from what we would supply to DOLA or to meet this requirement, is that we are looking at ways to grow even smartly. How can we support affordable housing and still maintain the water that we will need? This Lake McIntosh was an option that was put into place.
But it's
right.
not, it's not limited. You said it wasn't limitless, right? It's like a 1-for-1 with CBT.
We require 1.5 shares of Lake McIntosh. That's what Longmont said. 1.5 shares of Lake McIntosh is to them about equivalent to the CBT.
Right. So if we wanted to grow, like say we adopted a strategic growth plan for affordable housing, not outside of the realm of possibility in the next 10 years or something, but like. Either we would need to rely on like Macintosh shares, assuming it's there and we can match it with our use of CBT, or we'd have to go back to Longmont and be more specific about our IGA.
No, I guess I'm not sure where right now, they are open to us taking in as much like Macintosh as we want to.
I see. Okay, I missed that part.
Let's quote that with currently our agreement is we can have 1,200 and something service connections. That's the limit the town has. We currently have slightly over 900. We have about 300 3/4 inch equivalents that we are allowed. Then we'd have to renegotiate. We'd have to go back to Longmont and ask, could we do more than that? So Longmont has looked at actually last year, we sat down and had an analysis. They're pretty comfortable with where our water is now, knowing that we would require either 1.5 Lake Mac or 1 CBT for those remaining 300, and we would have enough water. So they'd be okay, at least that's what they say now. I don't know if we really went all 300, we're then 450 Lake McIntosh. Think there's 1,300 Lake McIntosh shares, I don't know.
And would
But
Oh, I'm sorry. Henry.
Right now, they are saying that they'd be okay with us to take Lake McIntosh for all of our potential water rights.
Was that based on like the Dr. Cog conversation around maybe needing that much growth by some calculation or what?
No,
Where
that-
did we get to that original number?
Wait.
The
wait.
1250.
That's in the agreement with Longmont from
No.
2004.
Where did that come from, that number, do you know?
No,
Okay,
they said that would be the growth. The planners back at that time thought,
That's what I
okay,
thought.
maybe we would grow to that point.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. It's great because you do these very complicated agreements and then all of a sudden, before you realize it, 20 years has passed.
yeah,
Right.
Like, can we do what?
so I guess kind of one
None
of
of
the,
us are gonna ever require an IGA revisit. I doubt it. I really don't see it.
so yeah, I think one of the takeaways from this for me is, you know, according to the IGA we have and the treatment capacity and the code we have in place, we have about 273 single-family equivalents that could be connected to the water system. The HNA that Dr. Cog adopted, I think our number is what, 87? So that's why Aaron and I think like, for the purposes of this exercise, we can check the boxes, right?
Yeah, what was
Does
our-
it,
The previous housing study, though, something quite a bit more, almost ridiculous, but I mean, they were basing it on something, right?
yeah, and I don't know, I mean, I haven't, I read it, but it's been too long for me to go back and connect those dots.
We couldn't get them to tell us what.
But I think, not that the IGA can't be amended, and not that we can't increase that number potentially, but if we, once we go past 1250, then again, it would require some revisiting, but I think, you know, homes are getting more efficient in water usage and, you know, depending on how we're using water, I think that there's probably excess capacity in that 1250, but I think for the purposes of strategic growth exercise,
Yeah,
I think we'll be fine with demonstrating to DOLA.
is there, is irrigation of land for single family a higher water use than domestic water? Do you, like, you know, in-house domestic water? I have no idea, just curious.
In general, I would say yes. Although it's seasonal, right? So you're only looking,
It
but
should be big.
the average we've talked about, which could definitely fluctuate, is 3,000 gallons for internal use. Again, a larger house may be more at 5 and a smaller house more at 1. But the average being about 3,000. I haven't revisited that in a few years. But then I know in the summertime, some people use at least 10,000 gallons a month irrigating their, that's a 20 maybe.
You know whose names, like, are you judging me?
Not either.
Figure out this.
Or me.
I'm for that.
Which again, I don't wanna get into, I brought it up to left hand St. Brain, but just as we're talking, if that is a legitimate use of water, when people look at it and say this there, we do wanna conserve. Again, this is a little off topic, maybe way off topic, but I was saying how the big concern a lot is our compact with the lower states and what water we have. And there's a big push to say, oh, Colorado, you don't need that much water because Colorado has been good at conserving. So to some extent, if you are using water and show this legitimate use of water, you're saying, hey, look, we really need 200 billion, whatever, billion gallons, not 100 billion gallons. And again, a lot of water says use it or lose it. CBT is slightly different, but our other ditch water rights are things that come in, you have to use it. So I was like, maybe we should be using our water to show that we need it here and then start to conserve.
Yeah, like, preserve your opportunity to grow when you need it, right? So
Yeah.
But
losing it.
that makes
So-
sense to me now, why we didn't do water restrictions where places like Aurora did, because they don't have enough water.
Right,
Yeah.
Now,
Right.
now it all kind of makes sense.
good shape. And with that, part of the, again, the DOLA, the comp plan addition is that you're talking to others. I did sit in on 2 meetings with all the regional water suppliers. Most of the Front Range up here was in pretty good shape. One community was like, wait, you guys are all okay? And
Mhm.
they don't, again, Colorado Big Thompson, which is one that really makes most of the communities up here sit in pretty good shape. But yeah, so it was looked at Boulder, others, you know, Longmont, Loveland, that our water supply is in pretty good shape. We still want everyone to conserve. There should not be wasting of water. But legitimate use of water is okay. So it's a balance.
Well, the impetus for the ask was really that 1,250 number. We're just like, what is, but answering that is complicated.
Yeah, and I think we still have quite a bit of documentation that we're gonna need to put together, but I think just, we haven't, it's not. The documentation hasn't demonstrated that yet, but I think the numbers all work.
No, there's always just a few like, and this is like conversationally, right? Like with our workshops or general business with like the portrait, like there's a couple levers that are pulled from time to time. One of them is the cost of infrastructure to annex, which is understandable, and one of them's water, and they're hard to understand because they're nuanced, but this, at least for me personally, helps me understand what that water number is and like kind of where the range is, so. When we're asked to make decisions around housing and land use, that number is really useful, so thank you.
Any other questions for Aaron? Great.
Well, you're the water man.
So the
Water and power.
Water, seriously.
package that'll come back to PCDC
Mhm.
in late October, November.
Yeah.
Will be some narrative
Yes.
description of this, it'll be the map.
Yep.
And it'll be something on this water, like essentially, we feel good about.
Yeah, so the water
Water,
supply element, the
right.
draft, Aaron has started a draft that was included in your packet. It needs all the numbers and it needs,
Yeah.
you know, I think we need to put all the numbers in there and demonstrate it all. And then, yeah, the map will continue to get refined. And then the narrative will be developed. We do also have to do the test sites. Right, so we have to go back and do kind of the test sites, which we've talked about, you know, some examples of what those are, I'll include those. And then we do have to put some high level cost estimates for infrastructure for the areas within the map that are not developed yet with infrastructure. So that is the kind of the final piece that we really haven't started yet.
And what do you see happening on the test site, sort of
So
study?
yeah, so that's like, I included it a couple weeks ago, like the test site for here for the town hall redevelopment, we'll just include those images. Right, that just shows like, what is the capacity for infill or redevelopment on a few vacant or underutilized sites in town? So we'll use this one. We'll use, I still need to get permission from the Tebow group to use the one out there, but I think we're fine. And then, we'll have to think about infrastructure costs for potential development out in the areas of town that do not have infrastructure today.
There's no infrastructure costs in the deed restricted buyout property.
I love that you just like throw little things at that.
Chuck a grenade.
Same.
Like that?
You're right.
And then because this is this an amendment or?
I'm gonna call it an addendum.
Yeah, an addendum, yep, better word. There'll be public
Yeah.
hearings.
Assuming,
Yeah,
yeah,
PCDC
Yes.
and
and the board.
the board.
Yep.
So.
Yeah.
Cool.
There will be opportunity for that public
Well,
input.
I
Absolutely.
feel like the last conversation we had about it 2 weeks ago helped us understand where you're coming from and what the goals are with it, so. let's
Yeah.
get it done.
I don't disagree that I think our residential zoning is, you know, it's been in place a really long time. I think if we all looked at some of the non-conforming things that exist today, we probably would all agree, like, our zoning code wouldn't allow that, but that's not a problem, right? So that's one reason to look at our code. I think also, is it resulting in types of development that we think are compatible, right? There's some mixed opinions out there, so I think we are right for taking a look at our code. But I'm looking at the board for that.
It wasn't actually a comment at you, it was more
I know.
further forward.
No, I appreciate that you, yeah, I don't disagree.
It's also not our opinions, so.
Yeah.
uh,
But I think it's probably time whenever, the board, I think, is ready to have staff and PCDC look at that.
How many states have required changes to R1 zoning? I know Oregon, California,
I don't know the answer to how many, but quite a
4
few.
or 5. Colorado seems to kind of be like a close follower.
Dabbled in it a
tendency.
little bit, we
I
haven't
just
gotten
feel
there
like
yet.
instead of like waiting for that to come down and be a mandate, at least chew on it a little bit. but-
And we think ADUs changes it somewhat, and if you have to allow an ADU, you're not quite, I mean, it's quasi or semi R2 automatically.
Yeah, it's like
Everything now.
one
Right.
foot out the door of that conversation. But I mean, California has up their ADU numbers too. I think you can go up to 3 in most of them.
Yeah, the thing that gets me is like, I think I did the math one time, like our minimum lot size in R1 is 7,000 square feet, yet if you run the actual lots, I think 40% of our lots are non-conforming. Right, 40% of our lots are smaller than 7,000 square feet, are like, is that a problem, right? Do we care, so there's so many things that our zoning code is so rigid that doesn't actually reflect what's out there, and is what out there actually fine? Do we want to talk about that?
Parking and density are not fun to talk about, but water makes a lot of sense to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And like, one of your bullets says multi-unit dwellings count as 0.7 of a water unit, so.
Per unit.
Yeah, so if one house needs 1 unit, but 2 houses on 1 lot need 1.4 unit.
Right.
The math is very interesting for a town that might want to grow or just use less water on SQ. Anyway, yeah, so far, man, this is a so far.
Don't apologize,
Yeah,
don't apologize.
I just, yeah, guilty of it too.
And if you're interested in, Water has an amazing tour.
Oh, yeah.
It's free, you can just walk in there and ask if they've done an entire
Like,
replica
so
of
fun.
how they get their water as part of a garden in the back.
Huh.
So you can go in and they, here's the mountain and here's where it snows and here's where it goes and they show the reservoir. It's fascinating.
And from time to time, they'll actually do tours. You can, go check out the tunnel and go over to the West Slope and see Lake Granby and the infrastructure and,
Next joint meeting.
yeah. So, yeah, they're good at keeping their folks educated. So, yeah, thank you for that.
That's fascinating.
very cool.
Okay,
Thank you, Aaron, thank you.
Okay, so what's happening in 2 weeks?
2 weeks, we are having a meeting. We have noticed a public hearing for a subdivision. So we will have, I think, fairly straightforward application for you on the 24th. And then I think if the 3 of us maybe want to hang and see if we want to put, Doug and you, if there's anything we want to put forth on a workshop, but I won't have anything on the strategic growth element. We're not going to be coming back to you with that, but if there's anything else, we're going to revisit, so we can chat. But do please plan on a meeting on the 24th.
When's this, I forget, do you know when my 6 years is up?
I want to say October.
It's coming up, October, okay.
Let me double check.
As long as it's not August 24th, we're okay.
It's October.
Is October? Okay. Yeah, fair.
I'm sure you guys could handle it, I just thought I should at least talk to Victoria about it.
Okay.
And then emails for,
I already emailed
Yeah.
Dolores and Maria,
Okay.
who are in charge of
All right.
getting all that.
Thank you.
done.
We're
Yeah.
set for priorities by the end of this month. So I think once we get really crystal clear